During what seemed like a routine HOA dispute in Judge Judy's iconic courtroom, the unthinkable happened. Karen Morrison, a power-hungry HOA president with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a designer handbag clutched like a weapon, did something no litigant had ever dared in Judge Judy's legendary 25-year career. She looked America's most feared judge directly in the eye and launched a verbal nuclear bomb that would change everything. "Judge Judy is shameless," Karen spat with venom dripping from every word. "A failed judge who doesn't understand real authority like mine." The courtroom didn't just go quiet, it went dead. Even the camera operators stopped breathing. The audience's collective gasp could be heard 3 blocks away as Karen's words hung in the air like toxic smoke. But what Karen Morrison didn't know in that moment of supreme arrogance was that she had just signed her own destruction warrant. Judge Judy, the woman who had demolished countless entitled bullies, slowly removed her signature glasses with surgical precision. Her eyes, those legendary eyes that had made grown men weep on national television, locked onto Karen with the intensity of a laser beam. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity before Judge Judy's lips curved into the faintest, most terrifying smile anyone had ever witnessed. Karen thought she had just delivered the power move of the century. But what she had actually done was light the fuse on her own explosive downfall that would leave her visibly shaken, and America absolutely buzzing with excitement. Within seconds of Karen's outburst, social media erupted like Mount Vesuvius. Karen calls Judge Judy Shameless rocketed to #1 trending topic faster than any courthouse drama in television history. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled in complete panic because this wasn't scripted, this wasn't planned, and this definitely wasn't going according to anyone's playbook. Phone lines jammed as millions of viewers called in, demanding to know what Judge Judy would do next. In her quarter-century reign as television's supreme arbiter of justice, Judge Judy had never been challenged this boldly, this publicly, or this stupidly. Karen Morrison had just declared war on an icon, and she had absolutely no idea what kind of storm she had awakened. The woman who thought she could intimidate America's judicial queen was about to discover that some battles you simply cannot win. If Judge Judy's revenge shocks you, smash like, subscribe for ultimate karma moments that'll restore your faith in justice. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Within 2 hours, the clip of Karen calling Judge Judy shameless had exploded to 12 million views, breaking every courthouse drama record in internet history. Comment sections overflowed with shock, outrage, and disbelief that anyone would dare challenge television's most formidable judge. But Karen Morrison wasn't backing down. Instead, she was doubling down with the kind of delusional confidence that only comes from a lifetime of getting away with bullying behavior. Her social media accounts lit up with smug self-congratulatory posts that made viewers' blood boil. Finally, someone stood up to that old has-been. Karen typed with manicured fingers, completely oblivious to the digital storm brewing around her. She posted selfies with captions like "Truth Teller" and "Real Authority Speaks Up," each post more tone-deaf than the last. Meanwhile, behind the mahogany doors of Judge Judy's chambers, something far more sinister was unfolding. While Karen celebrated her supposed victory online, Judge Judy sat in complete calculated silence, methodically reviewing case files with the precision of a surgeon preparing for the most important operation of her career. Her staff had never seen her this quiet, this focused, this dangerously calm. They exchanged nervous glances as their boss worked late into the night, making phone calls, requesting documents, and building something that would soon make Karen's viral moment look like child's play. Judge Judy's legendary temper wasn't exploding outward. It was crystallizing into something much more terrifying. Pure, focused vengeance wrapped in legal brilliance. As Karen gave interview after interview to any media outlet willing to listen, doubling down on her shameless comment and painting herself as a victim of judicial tyranny, Judge Judy's secret investigation was uncovering a goldmine of Karen's HOA abuses, boxes of neighbor complaints that Karen had ignored, financial records showing suspicious fine collections, and testimonies from terrorized homeowners began piling up on Judge Judy's desk. Phone calls poured in from Karen's victims, desperate people who had been waiting years for someone with real power to listen to their stories. While Karen basked in her 15 minutes of fame, convinced she had won some great victory, Judge Judy was methodically building something much bigger, much more devastating and much more permanent than a viral moment. The hunter had become the hunted, and Karen had no idea her world was about to implode. As Karen continued her victory lap across social media, completely oblivious to the gathering storm, something extraordinary began happening. Judge Judy's phone lines were flooded with calls from Karen's own neighborhood, and what emerged was a horror story of systematic abuse that would make even the most hardened legal professionals sick to their stomachs. Neighbor after neighbor came forward with testimonies that painted Karen Morrison not as some brave truth teller, but as a power-drunk tyrant who had been terrorizing her community for years with the ruthless efficiency of a dictator. The first call came from Bill Henderson, a 78-year-old Vietnam veteran whose voice trembled with emotion as he described how Karen had fined him $500 for flying an American flag that she deemed too faded and disrespectful to the neighborhood aesthetic. This was a man who had served his country with honor, who had bled for the very flag Karen was now using as a weapon against him. The image of Bill, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as he slowly lowered his beloved flag for the last time, was burned into Judge Judy's mind like a brand. But Bill's story was just the beginning of Karen's reign of terror. Maria Gonzalez, a single mother working 2 jobs to support her 3 children, called next with a story that made Judge Judy's legendary temper reach a boiling point. Karen had threatened Maria with eviction because her 6-year-old daughter had drawn hopscotch squares and rainbow flowers on the sidewalk with chalk. When Maria tried to explain that her children had nowhere else to play, Karen's response was to install secret surveillance cameras aimed directly at the family's front door, creating a harassment campaign that left the little girl afraid to even step outside. "Mommy, why can't I draw outside anymore?" The innocent voice echoed in Judge Judy's mind as she reviewed photograph after photograph of Karen's surveillance setup that looked more like a prison than a neighborhood. But the true scope of Karen's corruption became clear when Judge Judy's investigators uncovered the financial records. Every excessive fine, every harassment campaign, every power trip had one underlying motive: money. Karen had turned her HOA presidency into a personal revenue scheme, using her position to fund her luxury lifestyle at the expense of hardworking families. Designer handbags bought with veterans' flag fines, spa treatments paid for with single mothers' chalk art penalties. Judge Judy had seen corruption before, but this level of calculated cruelty toward the most vulnerable members of a community ignited something primal in her. As she reviewed case after case, her famous composure began to crack. The final straw came when she saw a photograph of Maria's daughter, face pressed against the window, watching other children play while she remained trapped inside by Karen's tyrannical rules. Judge Judy reached for her phone with hands shaking not from age but from pure rage and dialed her producer. "Clear my schedule," she said with deadly calm. "We're going back to court, and this time, it's personal." 3 weeks after Karen's viral attack, Judge Judy made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the television industry. In an unprecedented move, she would be hosting a special episode dedicated entirely to HOA disputes, and she personally invited Karen Morrison to return as her featured guest. The invitation was delivered with the kind of professional courtesy that made Karen's ego swell to dangerous proportions. She saw this as her ultimate vindication, her chance to prove on national television that she was right and Judge Judy was indeed the shameless has-been she had called her. Karen accepted immediately, posting on social media about her upcoming educational appearance where she would teach America about real community leadership. She had no idea she was walking directly into the most elaborate legal trap ever constructed on daytime television. The morning of the taping, Karen arrived at the courthouse in her most expensive outfit, radiating the kind of toxic confidence that only comes from a lifetime of getting away with bullying behavior. But as she entered the courtroom, something felt different. The gallery was packed, unusually packed, with faces she didn't recognize but somehow seemed familiar. Her stomach began to churn as she realized these weren't random audience members. They were her neighbors, her victims, the very people whose lives she had made miserable for years. Bill Henderson sat in the front row, his weathered hands folded over a small American flag pin on his lapel. Maria Gonzalez was there with her 3 children, the youngest clutching a piece of chalk like a talisman. Judge Judy entered with the kind of purposeful stride that made the entire room fall silent, and when she looked at Karen, her eyes held the promise of absolute justice. "Ms. Morrison," Judge Judy began, her voice carrying the weight of divine judgment. "3 weeks ago you called me shameless. Today let's see what real shame looks like." Karen's confident smirk faltered for the first time as Judge Judy gestured toward the packed gallery. "I'd like you to meet some people whose lives you've touched with your unique brand of community leadership." The systematic destruction began immediately as Bill Henderson was called to the witness stand, his voice trembling not from age but from years of suppressed anger and humiliation. He told his story with the quiet dignity of a man who had served his country with honor, only to be persecuted by a woman who wouldn't know patriotism if it saluted her in the face. "She made me take down my flag," Bill whispered. "The same flag my buddies died for in Vietnam." Karen's face began to pale as the weight of her actions was laid bare before millions of viewers. Maria's testimony was even more devastating. She described in heart-wrenching detail how Karen's harassment campaign had turned their home into a prison, how her children cowered inside while other kids played freely, How a piece of sidewalk chalk had become a weapon of oppression in Karen's twisted world. My daughter stopped drawing, Maria said, her voice breaking, because she was afraid the mean lady with the cameras would take our house away. At this point, Judge Judy's legendary composure cracked just enough to reveal the white-hot fury burning beneath. She turned to a large screen behind her bench and began displaying Karen's financial records with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence in a murder trial. Every fraudulent fine, every excessive penalty, every dollar stolen from hardworking families was laid bare for the world to see. Ms. Morrison, Judge Judy said, her voice rising to the legendary pitch that had made courtroom history. In 25 years of judging human behavior, I have seen entitled, I have seen arrogant, I have seen cruel. But you have redefined what it means to be shameless. Karen's confidence wasn't just crumbling, it was disintegrating in real time as millions watched. Her hands shook as she tried to defend herself, but every word that came out of her mouth only dug her grave deeper. Judge Judy's verdict was swift and merciless. Karen would repay every excessive fine with interest. Her removal from the HOA board was not just recommended but demanded. And in a moment that brought tears to veterans across America, Judge Judy looked directly into the camera and declared, "Mr. Henderson's flag flies for freedom, not for Karen Morrison's approval." Karen's public meltdown in that courtroom became the stuff of internet legend. A complete psychological collapse broadcast to millions as justice finally, definitively, and spectacularly won. The transformation that swept through Maple Grove Estates in the days following Judge Judy's courtroom demolition of Karen Morrison was nothing short of miraculous. It began with a single act of defiance that would have made the Founding Fathers weep with pride. Bill Henderson, the 78-year-old veteran who had been forced to remove his beloved American flag, stood in his front yard at dawn with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as he raised not just one flag, but three. The original flag that Karen had called Too Faded, a brand new flag sent by viewers who had seen his story, and between them, a POW MIA flag that had belonged to his late brother who never made it home from Vietnam. Neighbors who had been too terrified to speak up during Karen's reign of terror came pouring out of their houses, some still in pajamas and robes, to witness this moment of pure patriotic rebellion. What happened next was even more beautiful. Maria Gonzalez, the single mother who had been terrorized for her daughter's innocent chalk art, organized what would become known as the Great Chalk Festival of Maple Grove. Children from across the neighborhood descended on every sidewalk, driveway, and permitted surface with buckets of colored chalk, transforming the sterile, oppressive landscape Karen had created into a vibrant canvas of childhood joy. Rainbow hopscotch courts stretched for blocks. Inspirational messages covered crosswalks, and elaborate chalk murals turned the community into an outdoor art gallery. The laughter of children, silenced for so long by Karen's tyrannical rules, echoed through streets that had been funeral quiet for years under her oppressive regime. But the most shocking development came when Judge Judy herself appeared unannounced in the neighborhood, driving her own car without fanfare or cameras. Word spread through the community like wildfire, as America's most famous judge walked from house to house, personally apologizing to Karen's victims and witnessing firsthand the damage one power-hungry individual could inflict on an entire community. When she reached Bill's house and saw the three flags flying proudly in the morning breeze, the emotion was overwhelming. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her famous tough exterior cracking as she saluted the elderly veteran, "thank you for your service to this country. That flag stays up, and anyone who tries to touch it will answer to me personally." The embrace between the small-town veteran and television's legal icon became an instantly viral moment that restored faith in justice for millions of Americans. Meanwhile, Karen Morrison's world was collapsing with the speed and finality of a controlled demolition. Her social media accounts, once filled with arrogant proclamations of authority, were now flooded with thousands of comments from outraged viewers who had witnessed her courtroom humiliation. The hashtag #JusticeJudyKaren became a worldwide trending topic as people shared their own HOA horror stories and celebrated the downfall of a neighborhood tyrant. Every attempt Karen made at damage control backfired spectacularly, with each defensive post only digging her deeper into the hole of public shame she had created for herself. Her carefully curated image as a successful community leader crumbled as screenshots of her most offensive HOA violations went viral across every social media platform. The isolation was, perhaps, the cruelest punishment of all. Former friends and allies on the HOA board, people who had once enabled Karen's reign of terror out of fear or convenience, began distancing themselves with the desperation of rats fleeing a sinking ship. Board meetings that Karen had once dominated with iron-fisted authority now proceeded without her input, as her remaining supporters melted away like snow in summer. Phone calls went unanswered, social invitations dried up, And the woman who had once wielded absolute power over an entire community found herself completely alone in her oversized house, watching through designer curtains as her neighbors celebrated a freedom she had tried so hard to steal from them. The community was healing around her, growing stronger and more united than ever before, while she remained trapped in a prison of her own making, isolated by the very cruelty she had used to control others. If Judge Judy's epic Karen takedown gave you chills, smash that like button. Subscribe now because the shocking redemption twist coming next will blow your mind. Rock bottom came for Karen Morrison on a Tuesday morning when she sat alone in her oversized McMansion, surrounded by the luxury items her corruption had bought, but unable to enjoy any of it. Legal bills from homeowner lawsuits were mounting faster than she could pay them. Her bank accounts were frozen pending Judge Judy's restitution orders, and the silence in her house was deafening. The woman who had once wielded absolute power over an entire community now had no friends, no allies, and no escape from the prison of shame she had built around herself. The breaking point came when her 82-year-old mother called from Florida, her voice heavy with disappointment that cut deeper than any courtroom verdict. "Karen, I saw the show," the elderly woman said with tears in her voice. "I raised you better than this. What happened to my little girl who used to stand up for kids being bullied at school?" That phone call shattered something inside Karen that had been hardened by years of unchecked power and entitlement. For the first time in decades, she looked in the mirror and saw not a successful community leader, but a broken woman who had become everything she once despised. With trembling hands, she wrote a letter to Judge Judy, each word carved from genuine remorse rather than calculated damage control. "I was wrong," she wrote in handwriting that shook with emotion. "I became everything I hate. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging for the chance to try making things right." She never expected a response, but 3 days later her phone rang with a number she recognized from her worst nightmare. Judge Judy's voice was firm but not cruel when she delivered the most shocking twist of this entire saga. "Karen," she said with the authority that had made her a television legend, "shameless people don't apologize. Broken people need fixing, and fixing takes work." The offer was unprecedented. Supervised community service that would put Karen face to face with the people she had hurt most. Veterans like Bill, single mothers like Maria, and the children whose joy she had tried to steal. Karen's acceptance came through tears of genuine remorse as Judge Judy arranged secret meetings that would begin Karen's long journey from neighborhood tyrant to humble servant. Watching Karen wash dishes at the Veterans Center, awkwardly but sincerely apologizing to Bill, and teaching children about respect at Maria's community center became the most shocking transformation anyone had ever witnessed on television. 1 year later, the annual Maple Grove Estates block party looked nothing like the sterile, fear-filled gatherings of Karen's tyrannical reign. Red, white, and blue streamers hung from every lamppost. Children's laughter echoed through streets once silent with oppression, and the aroma of barbecue filled the air where tension used to live. The most shocking moment came when Karen Morrison appeared at the edge of the celebration, carrying a plate of homemade cookies with hands that trembled not from arrogance, but from genuine nervousness. The woman who had once demanded worship now hoped simply for acceptance. Bill Henderson, the veteran whose flag had started this entire transformation, saw her first and did something that made the entire neighborhood hold its breath. He walked slowly toward the woman who had once terrorized him, extended his weathered hand, and said words that proved healing is always possible. "Thank you for learning, Karen." But the most beautiful moment came when Maria's 6-year-old daughter, the same child who had once been afraid to draw with chalk, ran up to Karen with a rainbow-colored sidewalk drawing. "Thank you for letting us play," the little girl said with the innocence that only children possess, handing Karen a piece of art that represented everything she had tried to destroy, but ultimately helped restore. Karen's tears weren't tears of self-pity anymore. They were tears of gratitude for a second chance she never thought she deserved. The party reached its emotional peak when Judge Judy made a surprise appearance, walking through the crowd like a conquering hero returning home. "Karen called me shameless a year ago," Judge Judy announced to the gathered crowd, her voice carrying across the celebration. "She was right. I am shameless about defending the innocent, and I always will be." Karen stepped forward, her voice strong but humble as she addressed the community and the woman who had saved her soul. "Judge Judy didn't just humble me," she said. "She saved me from becoming a monster I didn't even know I was." The HOA had been reformed with fair policies. Karen now served as volunteer coordinator rather than dictator, and Bill's weekly flag ceremonies had become neighborhood traditions that brought everyone together in patriotic unity. If Karen's incredible transformation from HOA tyrant to community helper restored your faith in redemption, smash that like button to spread hope. Subscribe for more stories where justice wins and bullies learn to love. Comment justice if Judge Judy is America's real superhero. And share this with anyone who needs to remember it's never too late to change.